Ladies, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Sam, and I moderate these weekly webinars. And in just a second, we're going to be joined by Wesley Boudreau, one of our Merck-focused financial advisors here, who's going to be covering some topics related to the 72T. He'll also have some time to answer just a couple questions after his presentation has ended. I apologize in advance if he does not have time to answer your questions specifically. I invite you to continue to ask away in the comments. It's completely anonymous, and we'll make sure one of our Merck-focused advisors can answer that question directly with you either through phone or email after the presentation has ended. As we wait for a couple other people to trickle in, I should also remind you we are not affiliated nor endorsed whatsoever by Merck. We are a completely independent group of financial advisors here, so please keep that in mind as you're listening along. And lastly, throughout Wesley's presentation, you will see some links popping up on your screen. Those will be from me. They are going to guide you to various resources we have available for you, one of which is our calendar where you can book an appointment with one of our Merck-focused financial advisors, as well as links to our LinkedIn and our YouTube. I encourage you to follow us on both, either or platforms. We would really appreciate it. We post tons of Merck-related content weekly, and we really think you'd get some value out of it if you considered following us. And if you choose to do so, thank you in advance. We appreciate it. And without further ado now, let's jump right into it with Wesley Boudreau.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction, Samantha. And like she said, today we're going to be talking about 72T, which is substantial and equal periodic payments under the IRS Rule 72T, as far as a way to access your IRA or potentially 401k or employer-sponsored plan prior to age 59.5 to get away from the 10% penalty. We'll also touch on other options like age 55 rule and different ways to get at one-time distributions from an account in order to avoid that 10% penalty. But ultimately, we'll dig into different options with the 72T, what it looks like, how to process it, some of the ins and outs of it, and some examples throughout the way as well. Now, again, the retirement group, we work with corporate employees, helping them transition into retirement. So we've worked extensively with clients, helping them process these 72Ts. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the downfalls of these as well. So you got to make sure you are working with a firm that does have experience with this, because if you make mistakes, then it can retroactively penalize you. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So before we get into the 72T, let's talk about the age 55 rule. This is something that we're going to talk to our clients and prospects about more often probably than most other advisors. Typically, whenever you're talking to a financial advisory firm, their number one goal is to get you to roll that money over so they can help you manage it. Now, if you're coming to us and let's say you're somebody who maybe you're retiring at age 57 and you've got, let's say, $500,000 or $1 million 401k, and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to get this rolled over to an IRA so I can get it managed because I need help with that. But I do need to tap into before I start collecting Social Security as early as 62, or maybe I'm going to work part-time and not full-time. I need a little bit extra income. So a lot of firms might tell you, let's roll that over, we'll do a 72T, but we'll actually tell you there may be a better option, and that's what's called the age 55 rule, which you can do within your 401k plan, if that 401k plan allows, and most of them do actually allow, but you're going to be restricted by the different distribution options within there. So how's that rule situate? So if you are retiring from the firm that you work for at age 55 or later, or actually in the year you turn 55 or later, so you could theoretically have a birthday of December 30th, but you can retire on January 1st at age 54 of that year because you're turning 55 that year. And you can actually tap into your 401k without the 10% penalty anytime after that. So instead of having to wait till 59.5, let's say if you retire at 55 or 56 or 58, you can go in there and take a withdrawal from your 401k without the 10% penalty. And you still have the automatic withholding and everything like that, but it does avoid that 10% penalty. Gives you more flexibility because you can go in there and take it when you want, versus a 72T we'll talk about in a moment is a pretty structured situation where you have to adhere to that throughout the course of the next five plus years usually. As far as the age 55 rule, again, it depends upon the company rules. So some plans we worked with only give you one withdrawal per year, so you got to budget pretty well. Others may give you one withdrawal per month or multiple withdrawals per month. So it all depends upon that plan. And so a lot of times that example I gave you, somebody looking to roll over, we might tell them, hey, hold on just a second. Let's go back and review what do you need to take out over the next couple of years until you turn 59.5, and maybe keep that amount in the 401k plan. We'll help you allocate it. And then that way you can tap into that for any immediate needs. And we don't have to do a 72T and lock you into any type of payment structure that the IRS has set forth for you as well. And keep in mind, again, this is just to avoid the 10% penalty, not taxes. These are tax deferred vehicles, so you will be paying taxes as you take that out. So the 72T, what's a little bit different about that is that can be used in multiple accounts, primarily IRAs, You could theoretically use it in a 401k or 403b, but again, you're limited to the rules of the withdrawal options within there. So a lot of times, people tend to roll this over to an IRA, so they've got more flexibility in the investment choices, help from a firm like the retirement group, also the ability to control their taxes on those distributions. There's more flexibility there, but it can be done in a 401k as well, but you're limited to those withdrawal rules under there as well. So what it is that you're taking substantial and equal periodic payments based upon an IRS calculation. This is not something that you or I come up with. It's based upon IRS calculations. They use interest rates to do that. We'll give an example in a moment. And so as those interest rates change, it can dramatically change the amount you could theoretically take out from a 72T. We saw those go pretty low as interest rates dropped during the pandemic. Good news is with the Secure Act, they've actually put a floor or an option to do 5% or the greater of the interest rate they're using, which that interest rate's coming out between, depending upon a month you look at right now, high 4s, low 5s. So we'll probably assume 5% as a good example. That 72T, what happens is once you start that, you can do it at any age, but you have to do it for at least 5 years as a minimum, or until 59.5. So let's go back to that person. Let's say somebody retired at 57 and they were to set up a 72T. They're gonna have to do that for 5 years. So they'll have to do that until they turn 62. If somebody was 53, they'd have to do it for 6.5 years until they turn 59.5. And again, this is something that allows you to take out a set equal periodic payments without that 10% penalty. Again, does not get you around the taxes, just get you around that 10% penalty there. Okay. As far as some different kind of side-by-side comparisons of these, without my glasses, let me kind of zoom in here so I can go through these with you. But as far as the different plans, the 72T is going to be qualified plans, which again can cover employer-sponsored plans. The Rule 55 just going to be your 401k or 403b. Age restrictions, you can do any age at 72T. Again, you have to do it for at least 5 years or until 59.5. So you could theoretically do it at 40 and be stuck with that for 19.5 years. Age 55 is going to be for the age 55 rule, obviously. The duration I just went over. Tax implications, both are going to be ordinary income tax. We're trying to avoid the 10% tax in this case. Both of them, you're going to potentially lose flexibility as far as future withdrawals because you're taking money out. You're going to lose tax deferrability because, again, you're taking money out, so the opportunity cost there. And then as far as the flexibility, like we mentioned before, the 72T, you're locked into that, so you can't be pretty flexible with that at all. And then the age 55 rule, you're flexible because you can take out a withdrawal 1 year, skip a year or two, or take out 2 or 3 withdrawals 1 year if your plan permits. So there is more flexibility associated with that, and that's again why I talk about our clients. We're going to suggest they keep something in there if they're retiring before 59.5 and they're at least age 55. Even if they don't need it, we might say, let's leave something behind just in case something were to strike and you do think you need that money. So some other ways to get around that 10% penalty that are not 72T or age 55 rule. These are typically going to be for one-time situations, but if you're using that money for helping fund a birth or an adoption, there's limits there. Death, unfortunately, if you're passing on to beneficiaries, they avoid that 10% penalty. Disability, same situation. Education, if you use it for post-secondary education, a portion of that can be used without that 10% penalty. Equal periodic payments, we just talked about 72T. We'll dig more into that. If you're unemployed and you're using it for health insurance options, a first-time home buyer situation up to $10,000 can be a 10% penalty tax, avoid the 10% penalty. Medical expenses over certain limits. A rollover, if you're taking that money, rolling over to an IRA or another 401k, that's just transferring from one account to the other. So there's no penalty there, obviously, because you're not taking money out. And then in some cases, terminal illness waivers, which you can take that out if you're terminally ill, where you can avoid that 10% penalty as well. So let's get into some kind of examples. This is actually, we'll take a look at Cynthia in this case. This is an example we've used for many years at our seminars and now in our webinars. The ironic thing was, once interest rates started dropping, it wasn't as good. We had to go back and recalculate it. But with interest rates coming back up the last couple of years and then now coming down a little bit, and the ability for the IRS to use that 5% rule, this kind of makes sense again as far as the numbers here in this case. So let's look at Cynthia. She's 52 years old, so again, not 55, doesn't have that age 55 option. She's retiring early. She's got $800,000 in her pension and 401k IRA assets. She does have some other assets that she can tap into if she needs to, but her primary goal is saying, look, I need to get $42,000 from this $800,000 portion of my IRA. How can I do that? And again, if she were to take that out, one by one, year by year with just ad hoc withdrawals, it's going to be penalized 10%. So the best way to do that is at 72T, because again, she's not age 55 in this case, And so the goal here is to try and take that $800,000, set up a 72T, and then actually go through there and get roughly that $42,000 for the next 7.5 years for her situation here. So when we run through that calculation, in this case, this chart we're giving here, we're running, I think, about 4.29% example. So like I mentioned, the rates right now are closer to 5%, so she could probably get closer to about 50 grand or so. But in this case, we're able to look at this and look at it and say, okay, the RMD method, that's always going to be a lower method because it's looking at life expectancy. She's only getting about 23,000 out there. The annuitization or the amortization method, she's getting closer to about $44,000, $45,000. So one of those methods can be used, and she can get that for the next 7.5 years that we mentioned. So she may say, okay, great, let me do that 44 or 45,000, or we might say, well, let's just go ahead and let's look at the numbers and say, well, if we bump this to 5%, we might be able to only put $700,000 in that specific IRA, so only that portion is locked up to get you the 42,000 that you need. So again, it's a calculation method to kind of go through. Again, it's not something we set the numbers on. The IRS set the numbers on these. So again, we can sit down and go through this with you and tell you how we can look at that. And we'll give you a couple examples in a moment of different split strategies and how you may look at those different options as well. So another option for her is, okay, well, let's compare this to how much are we actually saving in taxes for this situation. Let's assume, I think it was about 8% growth rate in this assumption as to what she's going to get over the next 7.5 years. And if she kept that money in there for another 15 years or so, how much does that kind of snowball as far as the tax savings? So in this case, get that $42,000 and change. She would have had to take out about $50,000 or so in order to actually net that, because she's also paying that 10% penalty on top of it. And if I take a closer look at these, her IRA value after about 7.5 years, so excuse me, so 59.5, about 1,028,000 versus 954,000. So again, substantial savings there as far as on the growth. Total taxes about 118,000 versus 173, so saving over 50 grand in taxes. And if we let that IRA grow another 15 years, or grow after 15 years, we're talking about 1.76 versus 1.63, so about $130,000 difference on that growth of the IRA in this situation as well. So again, definitely something that we can look at as far as a one-on-one situation to show you what your long-term potential savings and short-term immediate savings are going to be tax-wise there. So let's kind of dig into some different scenarios of putting a 72T in action, what you're going to be looking at as far as you know, a lot of times, hopefully it's a set it, forget it, because you don't want to make a change, because if you do go back in there and make a change, the IRS can come back and retroactively penalize you. So if you were taking out, 30 grand a year, and you took out 30 grand over 2 years and you stopped it, that 60 grand would be a 10% penalty of $6,000. So we'll go through scenario 1, starting and stopping that. So we'll run into that situation. Scenario 2, 3, and 4 are different options where somebody says, hey, I need more money. How can I tap into that? Are we going to look at actually adding a new 72T if they've got other assets, taking a withdrawal from your 401k, or taking a penalty withdrawal and just biting the bullet there? Excuse me. So scenario 1, let's assume for all these we're going to have a small $400,000 balance, and let's assume that we've already done the math, and this person is telling us, look, I need $15,000 a month, for the next 5 years, or until 59.5, because I'm retired. I had a company car. I had to buy a new car, and that's my payment on there. That's all I need. I got my other expenses taken care of. So we run through, and maybe we run the calculation, figure out, okay, well, 250,000 of this can be moved into a new IRA, and that's specifically set up with 72T. So you get that $15,000 a month for the next however many years, 5 years, or 59.5. So in this case, the person does this, and after 2 years, maybe for some reason they roll the money, get to a different firm, or they forget to do it, or they just say, hey, I sold the car, I don't need it, or something. They just stop it. And what happens is, in this case, if they've stopped it, they've taken out $30,000. So the IRS is going to come back and tell them, okay, you agreed to a 72T for $15,000 a year. You've taken out $30,000. You canceled the 72T, so you didn't hold up your end of the bargain. So now we're going to tax you 10% on that $15,000 for 2 years. So $30,000, so a $3,000 tax penalty that person would be paying for making that cancellation, or forgetting, as well as another option. So scenario 2, let's assume the same person, they set that up, they got that $15,000 a year for the car payments, and then what they're doing is they're saying, okay, well, gosh, I ran into some issues, inflation's hitting in, I need more money, can we do a second 72T? So we'll go through that. We might say, okay, well, you got another $150,000 left over. Do we want to use all of that, or do we want to partition off? And they say, no, I just need an extra $6,000 a month, for instance, or something, or $6,000 a year. So we might say, okay, let's take $100,000 of that 150 remaining, set up a new 72T, and now you've still got $50,000 left over as a emergency if you need to tap into that. Now again, we're going through all these different options, but keep in mind, hopefully this is not all of this person's portfolio, because even though you're able to get at it, the problem is you're burning down those assets. So again, it's something to be aware of there as well if we're looking at higher 5% plus withdrawal rates. Now, as far as another scenario, let's assume that person's done their due diligence and they're working well and they're keeping that 15,000. They're going to honor that 72T, but God forbid something happens. Maybe you're in an area there's a snowstorm, or maybe a hurricane or something, maybe a car wreck, just something that's kind of unforeseen, and you've got to take out some money. So in this case, they need $10,000 because of something. And it's just a one-time situation. There's no need to set up a 72T, lock them into something else. So they may say, okay, let me just bite the bullet. Let me take a $10,000 withdrawal, pay the 10% penalty, pay the $1,000, and kind of eat those taxes. And it is what it is. I know I'm still saving on the other accounts, and in the scheme of things, I only had to pay $1,000 on that one distribution. Excuse me, for that 10% penalty. So it's not as big of a deal for them. Another option is, let's say that this person took our advice. And maybe they kept money in their 401k plan, or maybe they actually retired and went back to work. They got bored and were either able to build up a 401k plan, or maybe we rolled some money from their IRA into the 401k specifically for this option. We've done that before. Excuse me, where we've actually rolled money into a 401k so somebody can take an age 55 rule after they'd already left one company and then went to another and retired from there. So in this case, they may say, okay, well, I'm going to keep that 15,000 because I want to go ahead and again keep getting that paid out. But maybe I need to take something else out, a little bit here or there. So they'll tap into their age 55 rule within their 401k plan, and they can take out random figures. Maybe they take out 24,000 one month, 1 year, or 20. My glasses are off, so 21,000 1 year. Maybe they take out 15 the next, or maybe they stop a year. Maybe they take another 5,000. They've got that flexibility within that 401k plan. So again, that's a better option than doing another 72T or paying a penalty there again. So these are kind of 4 potential scenarios we may run into. So it's just good to kind of know going into this, so you know what those different options are. Excuse me. So in summary, some of the 72T options we kind of talked about are different ways to kind of get at your accounts without that 10% penalty. Again, this is not avoiding tax, it's just avoiding that 10% penalty. You can do the 72T, which is substantial and equal periodic payments. You got to stick with that for 5 years or until 59.5, whichever is longer. You can do the age 55 rule. There's also the different 10% penalty free options like first-time home purchase, medical expenses, things like that we talked about as well. But again, this is just because you can access the account doesn't mean you should. Again, some of these withdrawal rates, if you're using that 5% method, is a little bit high. Typically, most people we talk to are going to tell you 4% or lower to kind of maintain your assets for 30 plus years. So again, make sure that you understand your true cash flow needs. Hopefully before retirement, you're building up some emergency funds, and there's some other options to tap into that as well. But the goal is to kind of run through a cash flow analysis, figure out what the best option would be for you. Because again, everybody's situation is different and it's fluid. What you may be thinking now could change in a year. I've had conversations with a lot of people where we've talked about inflationary pressures and how that's kind of changed the last couple of years of expenses as well. So it's very important to kind of forward think on some of those as well. So kind of a summary, we'll talk about making sure you got a plan to kind of dig into all this, who the retirement group is. Again, we say that for the end, and hopefully you can schedule a meeting with myself or one of the other advisors here to go into your specific situation. But right now, about 3/4 Americans over 50 don't have a written plan. If you can spend about 10 minutes with us gathering some data, give us a couple of days to put together a full-fledged financial plan or cash flow analysis, we can kind of run through that with you. This is a great way to kind of determine, okay, do I have, what are my actual income needs? Can I retire? Should I retire now? Should I wait longer? What are the different benefit options within my 401k plan, my pension, healthcare, things like that? We can go through all those. And then we can also model a 72T in here, a different option we mentioned before, whether you're doing one or keeping the age 55 rule. We'll go through all those and model the tax ramifications of that for you. So again, any questions, just let us dig into that for you. And then retirement group, again, a lot of you have talked with us in the past and been to our seminars or been on one of these webinars, but if you don't remember, the retirement group, we are an independent financial advisory firm that focus on working with corporate employees, help them transition to retirement. Our goal is to hopefully catch you prior to retirement so we can kind of give you more education on what your options are. Myself and our other advisors tend to specialize in a select few companies, so that way we've got more information and more details on your specifics, like your company plan, 401k plan, maybe your pension plan if you have that, healthcare, retirement, medical benefits, life insurance continuation. We can go through all those different options and run that cash flow analysis, which is complementary to help you determine when is the best day for me to retire. So that way you can say, okay, maybe I want to retire at 60, I want to stick with that, or maybe, hey, I could go a little bit earlier if I want to, or, unfortunately I need to work a couple more years to fund the retirement I want. We can go through all those different options with you. And again, that's complimentary, so take us up on that. And we have offices throughout the country, so rest assured if you need to sit down with somebody face-to-face, we can accommodate that. But if you prefer to communicate via web meetings, phone call, email, whatever that is, just feel free to let us know. We'll be happy to kind of go into that with you. And with that, I'm going to wrap this up. I think I saw 2 questions come through, and we'll take care of those. But if you have any questions, you want to reach out to us beyond this, it's 1-800-900-5867, or you can email us at info@theretirementgroup.com. You can also use these QR codes to get into our LinkedIn if you want to follow along that way and get more updates on new webinars and seminars in your area. There's one there, and there's one to get into our calendars if you want to schedule an appointment with myself or one of the other financial advisors with the retirement group. And then if there's any additional questions that we miss here, we'll be happy to circle back with you on those. So the 2 questions I have coming in, one is if interest rates change during my 72T, can I change my 72T? Okay, so this is actually a pretty good question. I talked about how interest rates changed over the years. You used to not be able to get a very good 72T, especially during the pandemic when interest rates were really low. And since then, since the Secure Act, the IRS has set that minimum, or set the ability to do at least 5%, or whatever the interest rates are right now. So you can always do the 5% even if interest rates go down in the future. Unfortunately, once you set that 72T up, it's a contract with you and the IRS essentially. There's nothing we can do or change on that. So let's say if somebody set a 72T up during the pandemic and they realize, well, gosh, now I'm going to do a 5%, you can't go in there and change that. Now, if theoretically, if it was something we had the conversation and maybe that person did that, right before they changed the rules, it might have been worth, if they're taking out monthly, maybe canceling that 72T original one, paying the 10% penalty on it, and then going in there, starting a brand new one. But no, you cannot change that 72T. If you make any changes to that, take any less out of there, or stop that, again, you're going to go back and retroactively be penalized on there. Another question, kind of the same aspect. If I don't need my 72 payments anymore, can I roll them over? That's another good question. Good attempt. The answer there again is no. Think about it like an RMD, a required minimum distribution. This is the ability for the IRS to tax you, and once it comes out, it has to be a distribution, a taxable distribution, so you pay tax on there. So you cannot take that and roll that over. So let's go back to one of those examples of Cynthia. She was taking that $42,000 out, and let's say that 2 years later she gets a job, says, well, I don't need this. Now I'm taking $42,000 on top of my job. I'm in a higher tax bracket. Let me go ahead and just roll this over. Well, if she were to roll it over, she'd be breaking that contract, and she couldn't do that. So what would happen is then they would retroactively penalize her on however many years of that $42,000 she took out. So she'll have to decide whether to keep doing that and pay the higher taxes and maybe build up a slush fund or build up a brokerage account with it, or just stop it altogether and suffer that penalty on there as well. So again, that cannot be rolled over. It also cannot be converted to a Roth IRA. So again, once it goes out, it's essentially a distribution like an RMD would be. So good questions there. Again, if you have any questions that we didn't meet, or you want to circle back and set some time with us, just give us a call at 800-900-5867. I mentioned again, we work with a lot of different Fortune 500 companies. That does not mean we're employed by them or endorsed by them, but again, chances are one of our advisors has worked extensively with your company. So if you have any questions, company-specific questions, just give us a call. We can dig into those as well and help you understand if you have that age 55 or how 72T would kind of play into your situation if you are leaving before 59.5. I want to thank you, and I hope you guys have a great day.